The UK is changing, and why you need to leave before it's too late. Today I'm going to address some of the latest changes the UK is undergoing and how you can prepare yourself for a much better and healthier life abroad. I received yet another email from a client who is complaining about the current changes the UK is undergoing. We're going to be talking about lots of things, including taxes and how difficult employment has become in the UK. And we're also going to address some very specific topics that not a lot of people are talking about. And I'm going to present you with several options to choose from in the event that you're interested in moving abroad and escaping the British nightmare. So I received this email from a client of Nomad Elite, and the email says the following. He says, he was talking about the ultra low emission zones. He says, introduction of ULEZ, ultra low emission zones throughout the UK to restrict vehicular movement and further punish citizens by increased taxation via fines under the guise of protecting the environment due to climate change. Now, if you've been a loyal Nomad Elite subscriber or you watched one of our past videos on leaving the UK before 2030, you learned that the introduction of ultra-low emission zones was indeed implemented in London. This is not just a British effort, but a global effort to expedite the fourth industrial revolution. He goes on, he says, increase in vehicle excise duty and an increase in vehicle fuel costs. Increase in the rise of energy prices, electricity and gas. This is something that has changed a lot since the war in Ukraine began. And obviously Britain was very heavily dependent on Russian energy. So yeah, he says increase in the rise of energy prices, electricity and gas, with the UK being one of the highest, if not the highest in the world for the cost of energy. Now the UK, unlike Paraguay, a country that is very energy efficient and self-reliant when it comes to energy, the UK is not, because the UK is importing the vast majority of its energy so that British citizens can live a good life. But that has been changing since the beginning of the last crisis. And now the UK is heavily importing electricity, gas and so forth from other geographic locations, and in fact British citizens are paying more than ever. Yes, of course, they are working on supplementing the lost electricity through green energy, so this is happening, but the problem is it's a very slow and tedious process. So he says, if not the highest in the world for the cost of energy, despite having a vast amount of their own resources and renewable energy. Now, this is a very common issue across Europe. We can also see that a country like Greece, that's part of the European Union, is actually very resource rich, but refuse to use their own energy. And in fact, there is a lot of natural resources that Greece could capitalize on, but they're unwilling to do so, keeping their own population very poor and energy reliant on the outside, from outside sources. He goes on, he says, the introduction of solar power farms throughout the UK, building on prime farmland to destroy the country's ability to produce its own food. In the meantime, the government has just announced that it has launched the Satan program to dim the sun in the UK by spraying the skies with reflective chemicals. Implementing a crazy tax that will prevent the handling down of farms and farmlands to the next generation, both destroying inherited wealth and the growing of food. Now, he has a very important statement to make about the increase in bureaucracy throughout the UK. He says the introduction of more stringent restrictions and bureaucracy, sector dependent, on small to medium-sized businesses, strangling the lifeline of the UK economy by punishing independent business owners with higher costs, pushing more of them out of business, thereby allowing the state and larger multinational companies more control on who can do what, where and when. Now, the end of small businesses isn't just something that's uniquely a UK problem. This is happening across the European Union, where governments are making it super difficult to, first of all, incorporate businesses. You need so many licenses, you need government approval. It's almost impossible to incorporate businesses in certain sectors unless you have a large amount of prerequisites or you are a very favorable person. Here's something very important that has just recently started to take effect, and this is the two-tier police system. He got the following to say about the situation in the UK concerning the police system. He says, a two-tier police system is in place whereby the police will turn a blind eye to the issues caused by the new Brits. But when the locals raise their concerns regarding their children's safety, their women's safety, their family's safety from the behavior of these new Brits, the police focus their attention and resources on the welfare of the new Brits over the native population. The tensions are so high between the natives and the police that the natives are now fighting back at the police, which will only ensure martial law is deployed in the very near future, which is all by design. Now, we have seen similar situations play out across the continent of Europe, where the local law enforcement agencies have actually taken a favorable stance for the new people of their respective countries, the new EU citizens or the new EU residents over existing EU citizens and natives. Before we talk about the tax situation, I wanted to make a very important point here. If you are a citizen of the UK, in fact, if you're a citizen of any Western, located in the Northern Hemisphere, developed country, such as the United States of America, Canada, UK, European Union, where you are witnessing drastic changes to your very own society, a society that you have gotten accustomed to, or that you were accustomed to, but now obviously things are changing, you have to know that these uncontrolled changes that we're seeing, especially across the immigration sector, are not just happening in, say, the UK, right? They're happening throughout all the countries that I've mentioned. But it is also worthy to mention that many countries in the developing world, talking about Latin America, Africa, Asia, are actually doing a better job at protecting their homelands than their Western counterparts, than their Northern European or Northern American counterparts that are doing a much worse job. Needless to say, many people from the most developed nations in the world are looking to get out. They're looking for a plan B. Many are moving out permanently. They have the financial resources to do so. Perhaps they have a location independent business, or they're just fed up and they escape with their retirement income to start a new life abroad. All right, let's get started talking about employment rights and what's going on in this department. Now, my client, the Nomad Elite client, has to say the following. He says, previously, when you started a job, you had a 13-week trial period where an employer had the right to end your employment during or at 13 weeks if you were not suitable for the job. Now, obviously, this has changed, and we're going to get to this in just a moment. He says, there was no repercussion for the employer. Employees now have day one rights. This means that you can attend work for one day and have full rights. An example, no 13-week trial period. You can call your employer on day two and say that you're sick and be entitled to full statutory sickness benefit, which the employer must pay for 6 months. An employer cannot sack you whilst on sickness leave, cannot force you back to work with the threat of unemployment, or they would face an employment tribunal. He says this is catastrophic and costly to employers, as they now are very wary about who they employ, or even if they wish to employ someone new, as they do not know if the employee is genuinely looking to work or if they are looking to claim sickness benefits. The employee now has more rights than the employer. Now, this picture that we're seeing that our client has stressed tremendously throughout this email is that nowadays, if you're a small business owner, you're taking on more risk than you used to. And he believes, and he also told me about this in a private conversation, he believes that the government is putting these laws in place purposefully, like to pretty much put small businesses out of business. So in the near future, we're going to see larger businesses more and more. Smaller businesses are going out of business. They just can't afford doing business anymore, with all these new laws being implemented that truly favor employees over employers. You can see why it is so difficult to run a business in the UK in the 21st century. We see very similar things in the EU, where tenants have more rights than landlords. Naturally, people with second residencies, or even people who buy apartments, rent them out because they have good intentions of making rental income, they can no longer do so or don't want to do so because they can no longer protect themselves in the eyes of the law. Tenants have more benefits and they win over landlords. Let's see what he has to say about the current situation in employment. He says it is being proposed by the government that all employers must hire individuals solely for the purpose of listening to other employees' conversations. Their role is to make sure that no one is saying anything that anyone may find offensive. There will no longer be freedom of speech in the workplace. Okay, to further address now the issue related to employment, I want you to have a look at some of the recent numbers and how things are truly changing in the UK. So let's have a look at some past data and compare it to what's going on right now in 2025 and even in 2026, the year that follows the current one. So here we see, and again, this is an email that I received from a client. He says, in the past 5 years, talking about the minimum wage, he says, in the past 5 years, 2020 to 2025 tax years, the minimum wage has been increasing. Minimum wage is a legally mandated minimum hourly rate, and an employer must pay to their employees. Now, here it gets interesting. Over 21 years, previously over 25, so you can see that they lowered it by 4 years. A 40% increase from £8.72 per hour to £12.22 per hour. Then from 18 to 20 years old, a 55% increase, £6.45 an hour to £10 per hour. Apprentices, 16 and 17 years of age, a 65% increase from £4.14 per hour to £7.55 per hour. My client goes on, he says, in 2025 on average, a Scottish auxiliary nurse earns £12.82 per hour, an electrician earns £15.92 an hour, an accountant's clerk earns £13.49 an hour. You can see from these examples how the minimum wage of £12.21, let's say for a worker in a fast food restaurant, is lower over the years, catching up to the wage of a highly skilled worker. He says people no longer have the drive to have a profession, to train themselves for a better paid job, to work harder, to gain more security, as their skilled job is now as lucrative as working a menial labor job in fast food. No disrespect to fast food workers, as all workers are important for society. Now, just to prove to you that the UK is indeed going after upper middle class and wealthy British citizens, let's have a look at the tax number and how tax brackets and thresholds have changed over the past years. Here, for instance, in 2022, 2023, right? If you earned anywhere from £43,663 to £150,000, the tax rate was 41%. Whereas in this tax year, 2025 and also 2026, if we take a look at the numbers here, they will, now they're applying a 42% tax rate on income, £43,663 to just £75,000. So you can see that the threshold has pretty much been minimized by 50%, and you're paying a higher tax rate now if you have more income than you did just a handful of years ago. And here, for instance, too, this is very interesting, right? 2022 to 2023, a 46% tax rate was applied on income over £150,000, whereas in this year, 2025 and 2026, a 45% tax rate is applied on income above £75,001 until £125,140. So you can see again, there are definite changes happening here. Plus now, the highest income tax bracket of 2025 and 2026 is a 48% tax rate that is being applied to all income that exceeds £125,150. So yeah, from 2024 to 2025, the new advanced rate band of 45% was introduced for £75,000 to £125,000, 140. Previously, £43,663 to £150,000 at 41%. So there are drastic changes happening, even though it doesn't sound like a lot, just a few percent more, but they also changed the brackets, right? They changed the thresholds. National insurance rates for employees 8% up to £50,270 and 2% over £50,270. For employers, rate increased from 13.8% to 15%. Now, some of you are entrepreneurs, you're investors, you have a corporation in the UK. What do corporation tax rates look like now versus before? Let's have a look. From 2020 to 2022, a flat 19% tax rate was applied to all UK companies. From April 23 to the current tax year, 2025-2026, profits of less than £50,000 are charged at 19%. Profits between £50,000 up to £249,999 are charged between 19 and 25%. What does this mean to you? Well, the government wants a bigger piece of your income, of your corporate income, than the government did just a few short years ago. This is all changing. Profits over £250,000 are charged at 25%. Now, if you're an employer, there are some more numbers that I want you to absorb in this video. Over 6 years, the total employer cost has risen by £8,400 per employee. That's a lot. The highest percentage rise occurred in 2023 and 2024 and 2024-2025, 10.4%. The 2025-2026 spike is driven heavily by the increase in employer NI. Threshold lowered from £9,100 to £5,000. That's a big cut. Rate increased from 13.8% to 15%. Now, since we're talking about taxes, there's still a few more numbers I want you to take a look at before we're going to have a look at some valid and viable alternatives for you. If you're a Brit, an American, Canadian, Australian, or European Union citizen, if you want to move abroad, make sure you keep watching this video because we're going to touch on some very important options here, countries in a moment. Now, in terms of VAT, that's the value added tax. The value added tax rose in January 2011 from 17.5% to 20%. Reduced tax rate introduced in 1997 for domestic fuel and power, an example, gas, electric, and heating oil at 5%. Now, there isn't just one type of tax in the UK this time around. There are many types of taxes that you have to pay if you are a British citizen living in the UK, or it doesn't matter if you're a resident of the UK living in the UK, or if you're doing business, right? I mean, some of these tax rates will apply to you. There are a lot of taxes to be paid, including self-employment income taxes, right? Rental income taxes, employment income taxes, savings interest. You also have to pay that. Dividends are being taxed, right? Benefits in kind, by the way, and some state benefits as well. The forgotten tax that nobody talks about that we're paying a lot, some people are paying them every day, is the value added tax, also known as VAT. As we have just addressed, a 20% VAT is being applied to goods and services sold throughout the UK. Now, this tax rate, if you're an American watching this video, this tax rate sounds high because sales taxes in America are actually lower than they are in the UK. However, if you're a European Union citizen, you are probably not shocked by the 20% VAT that British citizens and residents have to pay whenever, or most of the times, or a lot when they go out to buy goods and services in the UK. Then there are also property and wealth taxes. I mean, the government's taking whatever the government can take from you to support the current system that's in place and to obviously fund the new Brits that are coming into the country. I mean, the government can only make this work through your efforts, your tax money, and the more tax money they take from you, the more they can supply the current system that's already under a lot of pressure. Now that we've talked about everything that's wrong about the UK, including the employment rights that are changing, especially employers being on the shorter end of things these days, that the government is making it so much harder for small business owners to thrive throughout the 21st century, and all the taxes that are being increased, taxes that are being added, benefits that are being taken away from you. What can you do about this changing situation that the UK is currently undergoing? Well, you can either A, stay in the UK, hope for the best, hope for things to change. Potentially you could become a politician yourself and take things in your own hands. I know this is kind of difficult and most people will never get to this point, but I'm just saying, right, these are some alternatives or some options for you to choose from if you decide to remain in the UK. You can pray to God and hope for the best, or you can leave your native country, which in this case is the UK, for good. Now, It is true that many countries in the Northern Hemisphere, including the UK, countries in Western Europe like Germany, France, the Netherlands, Austria, Italy, like all these countries are having really big problems. And if you look at probably the least messed up country across the Western Hemisphere, even though this country has so many problems, I think overall the United States of America is still the least messed up country because it is doing more than other countries to protect its very own borders, but it still is home to many issues that the current administration has yet to resolve. You have to know that if you have a location independent income, if you're an entrepreneur, investor, if you are a retiree, or perhaps even a family looking to get out of the UK to establish a better life abroad, you have better options. And when it comes to taxes, there are many better options outside of the UK. You can consider moving to tax-friendly countries in Latin America, namely Paraguay, Panama, and Uruguay. Now, starting out with Paraguay, which is one of the most tax-friendly, low-tax countries in the entire world, where you can obtain residency without proving economic solvency, which is a very rare gem because most countries, if you want to immigrate to most countries, they want to see some kind of economic solvency proof from you in order for the authorities to hand you residency, be it temporary residency or permanent residency. They want to see that. However, in Paraguay's case, and like I said, it's one of the few countries where that's not the case, you really only must have a passport from what I like to call a friendly nations visa country, which the UK is, plus you must hold a clean criminal record. So you can't have anything on your record that's not good, right? It has to be clean, spotless. Now, if that is the case, you may qualify for Paraguayan residency. Temporary residency is valid for 2 years, renewable, and before the 2 years are up, you have either A, the option to renew temporary residency for an additional 2 years, or B, you can convert to permanent residency, which is valid for 10 years and renewable. Now let's touch on the tax part that's super important in Paraguay's case, because you're looking to get out of the UK to minimize your taxes. In Paraguay's case, personal income taxes are capped at 10%. For residents. So if you become a resident of Paraguay, you're never going to pay more than 10% in personal income taxes, something that looks very different in the UK. Sometimes you may even pay less, and let me explain to you why. Any income that you bring with you from outside of Paraguay into Paraguay would be taxed at a tax rate of up to 10%. Now, income that you generate outside of Paraguay's borders that you don't bring with you into Paraguay is not taxable. So let's say you have a corporation, perhaps in Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, and you don't pay any corporate taxes in any of those countries, and you transfer that money into a foreign bank account outside of Paraguay, outside of Paraguay's borders, you're not going to pay personal income taxes on that income as a resident of Paraguay, so you wouldn't do that. But if you bring the income with you into Paraguay, yes, it would be taxed. However, let's say you bring in £30,000 annually and you spend £30,000 in Paraguay. The effective tax rate is 0. Why? You can deduct everything and anything that you want from your taxable income if you are and become a tax resident of Paraguay. So even if you bring income with you into Paraguay, be it from the UK, Singapore, the United States of America, Canada, Australia, the European Union, you bring that income with you into Paraguay and you spend all of that income, you're going to get a tax number. You can deduct all your expenses from your taxable income as a tax resident of Paraguay. You just have to keep your invoices and you have to file your taxes, right? You have to file everything with the government, but technically you can deduct everything and anything. So if your spending equals your income, you are not going to pay any taxes at all. Now, if your spending is less than your income, you would only pay taxes on the difference. So in this case, let's say you bring in £30,000 and you only spend £20,000. Well, you're going to pay income taxes on £10,000, and the maximum tax rate of 10% would be applied, which is still a lot less than you'd probably be paying in the UK. Now, when it comes to corporate taxes, Paraguay has a very unique system called the Maquila law, which applies a 1% corporate tax rate for all corporations that trade within the Mercosur region. So let's say you have a Paraguayan corporation that's doing business, selling goods and services between Paraguay and say Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, or Bolivia, you would pay just 1% in corporate taxes, right? This is a very conducive corporate tax rate, encouraging businesses to start operating in Paraguay, within Paraguay's territory, and you can generate a lot of money, and most importantly, you can keep a lot of money by setting up a corporate company that would be based in Paraguay, where you would trade within the Mercosur region, right? Now, other company structures in Paraguay would pay a maximum of 10% in corporate taxes on retained earnings. So you can see how Paraguay is so much more tax-friendly than the UK and a much healthier alternative to the chaotic times, the ever-increasing taxes that are currently being applied in the UK. Now, Panama is a country located in Central America, and if you become a resident of Panama, you would also not have to pay taxes on foreign-sourced income. So let's say you're a resident of Panama, you have bank accounts here in Panama or in different countries, and the money is generated abroad, you don't generate the money from within Panama's borders, you would not have to pay income taxes on that income while you are a resident of Panama. Now, this is great. This tax system that also Paraguay implements, by the way, is called the territorial tax system. It's very effective. Not a lot of countries in the world apply this tax system. This is not citizenship-based taxation. It is called the territorial tax system. And Panama applies it as well, which is great for entrepreneurs, investors, or even if you have a retirement income and you want to live, say, in Panama, you can enjoy that income pretty much tax-free while you're living in Panama. How can you obtain Panamanian residency? Panama is home to several residency programs. The most popular residency program for retirees is called the Pensionada Visa Program, which allows citizens of eligible countries that are on the Friendly Nations Visa list. In Spanish, it's called Países Amigos. If your country, and in this case the UK, is on that list, which it is of course, you can apply for this visa by proving a residual income guaranteed by a government or annuity program, and the income must be at least $1,000 monthly. So that is less than £1,000 monthly. If you have that income, you can retire in Panama and enjoy Panama's weather, the beautiful landscapes, you can enjoy the beaches, and most importantly, no tax on foreign sourced income. If you don't have a fixed guaranteed lifetime income, you may qualify for Panama's Friendly Nations Visa program. Now, there are a couple of options here. You can start a corporation here in Panama and work for your own corporation. So you become an employee of your own corporation. And by the way, you can also sponsor family members that are, of adult age and bring them with you into Panama. So this is a great system. Let's say you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, you have no intentions of getting married, but you both want to live in Panama, then you can both relocate to the country located in Central America and get a work permit, run a business, and make lots of money here while enjoying the beautiful tropical climate throughout the year. There's also residency by real estate investment, which is great. If you know you're going to be living here, you want to invest in the property, you don't want to be paying rent, then go ahead, qualify for the Friendly Nations Visa program, also known as residency by real estate purchase. The last option that I wanted to discuss with you, which is also much tax friendlier than the UK, is Uruguay, another country located in South America where you can apply for residency by proving an income. So yet again, similar to Panama, you have to prove an income that's consistent, that's reliable, it's a passive income, but in Uruguay's case, you have more options to qualify for the income. Unlike Panama, where the income must be guaranteed by the government, such as Social Security income, or like I have said, it's an income that's guaranteed by an annuity program. In Uruguay's case, you can get residency by proving any kind of income that's kind of passive. So you can get residency by passive income when, let's say, you have a rental property abroad and your tenant pays you monthly income. You can qualify for residency by income in Uruguay. Or let's say you have a corporation that pays you a fixed monthly income, you may also qualify for Uruguay's residency program. There's also an option to qualify for residency by purchasing a piece of real estate in Uruguay. If you're interested in relocating to one of the countries that I just discussed in this video, be it Paraguay, Panama, or Uruguay, go to nomadelite.com and click on book a consultation. I look forward to speaking with you and helping you obtain residency in one of these three countries. Thank you so much for watching this video. I truly appreciate your attendance, and I look forward to welcoming you to Latin America.